A millionaire is driving through a forgotten neighborhood when he sees an empty playground, except for a 7-year-old girl swinging alone, wearing a party hat and wiping away tears. Moved, he asks why she's sad. Her answer shatters his heart. "No one came to my birthday." When he learns the party was held in a rundown shack and none of her classmates showed up because their parents thought the house was unfit, the millionaire, owner of the country's largest amusement park, makes a decision that will forever change not only the girl's fate, but his own as well. The rain threatened to fall over Los Angeles on that grey Sunday afternoon, and Robert Miller adjusted the air conditioning in his Mercedes as he drove through the deserted streets on the city's outskirts. At 52, he had built a financial empire few could imagine. But at that moment, he just felt like a tired man heading home after another business meeting that had run longer than planned. The GPS was showing an alternate route due to traffic, taking him through neighborhoods he rarely visited. Simple houses lined the potholed sidewalks, and Robert watched through the armored window as a world that seemed to exist on another planet passed by. So distant was it from his reality of penthouses and mirrored office buildings. That's when he saw the playground, small and weathered, with rusted equipment and yellowed grass. The place was completely deserted except for a solitary figure that made his heart ache in an inexplicable way. A girl of about 7 was on the swing set, all alone, her small feet barely grazing the ground. What caught his attention most was the faded pink party hat on her head and the simple dress she wore, a stark contrast to her eyes, red and swollen from crying. Robert slowed the car, something stirring inside him that he didn't understand. There was something about the scene that transported him to long-buried memories of his own childhood, hiding in the empty rooms of silent mansions, waiting for parents who never came home. Unable to explain why, he parked the car and walked toward the playground. The girl looked up as he approached, and Robert saw a sadness so profound it made his throat tighten. For a moment, they just looked at each other in silence. Two completely different worlds connected only by that melancholy afternoon. "Hi," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "Why are you crying?" The girl wiped her nose on the back of her hand, hesitating before answering in a small, broken voice, "Nobody came to my birthday." The words hit Robert like a punch to the gut. He looked again at the faded party hat, at the dress that had clearly been chosen with love for a special occasion, and felt something inside his chest crack. How many times had he waited for guests who never showed up, in rooms decorated by staff while his parents were away on business trips? "When was your birthday?" he asked, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "Today," she replied, and a fresh tear rolled down her rosy cheek. "My mom made a cake and everything, but nobody wanted to come." Robert felt a fury build inside him, not at the girl, but at a world that allowed a child to spend her birthday alone and crying in a neglected park. At the same time, a compassion he thought he had lost decades ago began to awaken, like a plant re-emerging after a long winter. "What's your name?" he asked. "Anna," she answered, wiping her face again. "What's yours?" "Robert," he said, formally extending his hand before realizing how ridiculous that was. The girl shook it with her small, cold fingers, and Robert felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years. A cold wind blew between them, carrying the smell of imminent rain. Robert looked at the dark sky and then back at the girl, who had started swinging slowly again, as if she had given up all hope that the day could get any better. A decision began to form in his mind, something completely impulsive and out of character for his usually controlled self. For the first time in decades, Robert Miller was about to act with his heart instead of his head, without calculating risks or consequences. "Anna," he said, surprising himself with his own courage, Do you think I could come to your birthday party?" Anna's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something different in them, a timid glimmer of hope that made Robert's heart race. She stopped swinging and looked at him with an intensity that unnerved him. "You can," she whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear. Then, as if afraid he'd change his mind, she added quickly, "Are you for real? You're not kidding?" "I'm not kidding," Robert assured her, surprised by his own sincerity. "Where's the party?" Anna carefully slid off the swing and pointed toward one of the narrow streets leading away from the park. "It's close. My house is small. It's not pretty like the houses on TV, but my mom made chocolate cake." As they walked together, Robert noticed how the girl constantly adjusted her party hat, as if making sure she was still presentable. Her shoes were old but clean, and the dress, though simple, had clearly been ironed with care. There was a touching pride in how she had prepared for her own birthday. "How old are you today?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "7, Anna replied, holding up all the fingers on her right hand and 2 on her left. "My mum says I'm a big girl now." Robert smiled involuntarily. It had been so long since he'd talked to a child that he'd almost forgotten how differently they saw the world, with a mixture of innocence and wisdom that adults lost along the way. They turned onto a narrow street where the houses were even simpler, some unfinished, others clearly cobbled together with whatever their owners could find over time. Robert started to wonder if his Mercedes would be safe parked by the playground, but he pushed the thought away. Right now, it didn't matter. "That's it," Anna said, pointing to a small, wooden structure painted a faded blue. The roof was patched, and there was a small porch out front where a few plants tried to grow in old paint cans repurposed as pots. As they got closer, Robert could hear soft music coming from inside. Someone had put on children's songs, probably from a phone, creating a festive atmosphere that contrasted with the simplicity of the place. "Mom!" Anna yelled as soon as they reached the door. "Mom, I brought a visitor!" A young woman appeared at the door, and Robert was surprised to realize she couldn't be more than 28. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a clean white t-shirt and a denim skirt, and there was something in her eyes that mixed exhaustion with a fierce determination. "Anna, you went out without telling me," she said, but her voice was more worried than angry. Then her eyes met Robert's, and he saw immediate confusion cloud her face. "Mom, this is Robert," Anna introduced, holding his hand with familiarity. "He wants to come to my party, can he?" The woman looked from Anna to Robert, clearly trying to process the situation. Robert realized how strange it must look. A man in an expensive suit, with a watch that cost more than the entire house, standing on the doorstep of a rundown bungalow, asking to join a stranger's birthday party. I'm Carla," she said finally, extending a hesitant hand. "Anna's mom." "Robert Miller," he replied, shaking her hand and noticing how rough and calloused it was, the hands of someone who worked hard. "I found Anna at the playground. She told me about her birthday and, well, I asked if I could join." Carla looked at her daughter again, who was staring up at her with pleading eyes. Robert could see the conflict on her face, the natural suspicion of a protective mother warring with the desire to make her daughter happy on her special day. "Please, Mom," Anna begged. No one else came, and it was that sentence that broke Carla's resistance. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she opened the door a little wider. "Come in," she said, "but I'm sorry about the house. We weren't expecting company." Stepping inside, Robert was hit by a wave of conflicting emotions. The space was even smaller than it looked from the outside, basically 2 small connected rooms with a tiny bathroom in the back. The floor was painted concrete. The wooden walls had a few cracks where the wind whistled through, and the ceiling dripped in one corner where a small bucket collected water from a leak. But what impressed him most wasn't the poverty of the construction, but the love that shone through in every detail. The walls were decorated with colorful handmade balloons. There was a poster painted with craft paint that read, "Happy Birthday, Anna," in charming letters. And the small table was set with colorful plastic plates, paper napkins, and disposable cups adorned with butterfly stickers. In the center of the table, a homemade chocolate cake waited, simple but perfectly decorated with white frosting and 7 colorful candles. Beside it was a plate of homemade cupcakes and a few other sweets that Carla had clearly prepared with all the love in the world. "What a beautiful party," Robert said. And he realized he wasn't just being polite. There was something genuinely touching about this celebration prepared with such care amidst such simplicity. Anna ran to the table and gently touched one of the candles. "My mom made everything herself. She worked late last night making the cupcakes." Robert looked at Carla, who had crossed her arms and was watching the scene with a mix of pride and embarrassment. He could imagine how hard it must have been for her to gather the resources for this party, likely working multiple jobs to support her daughter. "Should I light the candles?" Carla asked, trying to regain control of the situation. "It's time for happy birthday." "Yes!" Anna exclaimed, clapping her hands. "Robert, will you help me blow them out?" Robert felt a lump in his throat. How many years had it been since he'd taken part in a celebration so simple and genuine? In his world, parties were elaborate corporate events or formal dinners where every gesture was calculated. Here, there was just a happy child, a dedicated mother, and a homemade cake. Carla lit the candles with an old lighter, and the golden light danced on their 3 faces. Anna squeezed her eyes shut, made a silent wish, and blew out the candles with all the force of her small lungs. Robert found himself applauding spontaneously, and for the first time in years, his smile was completely natural. "Now, let's eat," Anna announced, already cutting the cake with a large knife that seemed disproportionate in her small hands. Robert accepted a slice of cake on a pink plastic plate and took a bite. It was delicious, moist, with a rich chocolate flavor, and clearly made with basic ingredients but a lot of love. He ate sitting on the floor with Anna, leaning against the wall, while Carla watched them from the single chair in the house. "Is it good?" Anna asked, with chocolate at the corners of her mouth. "It's amazing," Robert replied, and it was true. "Your mom is a great cook." Anna smiled proudly and turned to her mother. "Mom, can we play a game? Can Robert play too?" Carla hesitated for a moment, but her daughter's radiant joy was contagious. "How about hopscotch? I can draw it on the ground outside." For the next few minutes, Robert found himself playing hopscotch in the small dirt backyard, hopping on one foot and laughing like he hadn't in decades. Anna shrieked with joy every time he completed the pattern, and even Carla began to relax, smiling as she watched her daughter so happy. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange, Robert realized he had spent hours there and was genuinely having fun. He hadn't thought about business, spreadsheets, meetings, or any of the things that normally occupied his mind. "Robert," Anna said, approaching him as they took a break, "can you come back tomorrow?" The question caught him off guard, and he looked at Carla, seeking some guidance. Carla stepped forward before Robert could answer, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Anna, Mr. Miller has his own life, his own commitments. We can't bother him." Robert noticed the tension in Carla's voice, the way she had carefully chosen her words to maintain distance without hurting her daughter. There was a weary wisdom in her eyes, as if she already knew that people from different worlds eventually returned to where they belonged. "It wouldn't be a bother," Robert said, surprising himself with the speed of his response. "Actually, I haven't had this much fun in a very long time." Anna bounced with joy, but Carla's brow furrowed slightly. Robert could read the concern in her expression, a woman working hard to protect her child, naturally wary of strangers, especially those who seemed to have far more resources than she did. "Mr. Miller," Carla said diplomatically, "I really appreciate your kindness today. Anna was so happy, and that means the world to me." But you don't know me," Robert completed, understanding her hesitation perfectly. "You're right to be careful. I'd do the same thing if I were you." He squatted down again to Anna's level, who was looking at him with hope. "Anna, your mom is right. She needs to get to know me better before I can visit again. That's important for your safety." The girl nodded solemnly, as if she understood the gravity of the situation. "But you won't forget me, all right?" The question struck Robert like a bolt of lightning. He looked at that 7-year-old child with traces of chocolate on her face and eyes full of hope, and felt something definitively shift inside him. How could he forget? How could he go back to his empty penthouse and pretend this afternoon hadn't happened? Never, he promised, and he knew it was a promise he intended to keep. That night, Robert got home and couldn't focus on anything. His 3,000-square-foot penthouse overlooking the city felt simultaneously too luxurious and too empty. He tried to work, but the spreadsheets on his computer screen blurred into the image of the homemade chocolate cake. He tried to watch television, but all he could hear was the echo of Anna's laughter in his memory. At 3 in the morning, he was awake on his balcony, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the difference between having everything and having what truly matters. For the first time in years, Robert Miller questioned if he had built the right life. On Monday morning, he arrived at his office with an idea that his employees would find completely insane. He called a meeting with his corporate events team and presented a plan that left them speechless. "I want to rent out the entire 6 Flags for a private children's party," he announced, referring to the most exclusive amusement park in the region. "Mr. Miller," his assistant and Sandra said, trying to hide her surprise, "a private buyout of 6 Flags costs over $100,000. Is this for a special corporate event?" "No," Robert replied simply. "It's for a 7-year-old girl's birthday." The silence in the room was absolute. Robert could see the looks exchanged between his employees, the confusion on their faces. He admitted to himself that the idea sounded absurd, but something inside him insisted it was exactly what he needed to do. "I want it for next Saturday," he continued, ignoring the perplexed expressions around him. "The works, decorations, food, rides, the best of everything. And I want you to send personalized invitations to her entire school class." "Sir," his CFO, Marcus, tried to intervene. "Perhaps we should discuss this more calmly." "There's nothing to discuss," Robert cut him off firmly. "I want everything arranged by Thursday. The girl's name is Anna. She's 7, and she attends Northwood Elementary School. Find out who her classmates are and get those invitations sent out." After the meeting, Robert was alone in his office, looking out the window at the city below. He knew he was acting impulsively, in a way completely contrary to his calculating nature, but for the first time in decades, it didn't bother him. He was about to discover that not all battles could be won with money alone. On Tuesday, Sandra returned to Robert's office with a worried expression he knew well. It was the look she used when there were problems money couldn't easily solve. "Mr. Miller," she began, consulting her notes, "I was able to locate Northwood Elementary and spoke with the school office. There are some complications." Robert stopped reading his reports and gave his assistant his full attention. "What kind of complications?" The principal, Ms. Margaret Price, refused to provide the list of students in Anna's class. She said it's against school policy to share students' personal information with third parties, even for apparently benevolent purposes. Robert frowned. In his corporate world, bureaucratic hurdles were easily removed with the right connections or suitable compensation, but he was dealing with a different universe now, one with different rules. "Did you offer to set up a meeting with me?" he asked. Sandra hesitated. "Yes, but sir, I need to tell you the rest. When I mentioned your name and explained the party, her reaction was very strange. It seemed almost suspicious." "Suspicious how?" "She asked a lot of questions about your intentions, about how you met Anna, about why a businessman would be interested in throwing a party for a child from a low-income family. When I explained it was just a kind gesture, she said that gestures like that always have a price, and that she needed to protect her students. Robert felt a wave of indignation rise in his chest. How could anyone question a genuine act of generosity? But at the same time, a rational part of his mind understood the principal's position. In a world full of people with bad intentions, suspicion was a form of protection. "Set up the meeting," he said finally. "I want to speak with this principal personally." "I've already scheduled it for Thursday at 3 p.m., Sandra informed him. "But sir, there's one more thing. I managed to get some information from the secretary. Apparently, Anna doesn't have many friends at school. She's, how can I put this, an isolated child." Robert's heart ached. Isolated how? The staff member didn't want to go into detail, but she implied that Anna is bullied because of her family's financial situation. The other children avoid her, and some parents don't allow their kids to get close to her. That's why no one went to her birthday. The silence that followed was heavy. Robert propped his elbows on the desk and ran his hands over his face, processing the information. The image of Anna alone in the park took on an even more painful dimension. It wasn't just a party gone wrong. It was a reflection of daily isolation. "Is there anything else I should know?" he asked, bracing himself for more bad news. Sandra consulted her notes again. Six Flags is confirmed for Saturday, but they require a 70% deposit by tomorrow. And, sir, I took the liberty of doing a little research on Anna's family. Robert looked up, interested. Carla Evans works as a cleaner in 3 different places, an accounting firm in the morning, a vet clinic in the afternoon, and she cleans offices at night. She supports her daughter alone. Anna's father is not in the picture. They've been living in that wooden house for 2 years, ever since they were evicted from their last apartment for non-payment. The information hit Robert like a series of punches. He thought of Carla, so young and working so hard to provide her daughter with dignity, and felt a deep admiration for her strength. "Sandra," he said, a new determination shining in his eyes, "I want you to prepare a complete dossier on me to present to the principal. Personal references, background checks, company certificates, everything you can find to prove I'm a trustworthy person." "Yes, sir. Anything else?" Robert stood up and walked to the window, observing the bustling city below. "Yes. I want you to find out the names of every student in Anna's class. If the school won't cooperate, find another way." "Sir, that might be legal," Robert completed. "Find a legal way. There's always a way." When Sandra left, Robert remained at the window, but his thoughts were miles away, in a small house where a brave little girl faced the rejection of her peers every day. Northwood Elementary was an older but well-maintained building with pale yellow walls and a yard where children played during recess. Robert arrived 15 minutes early, driving his most discreet sedan and wearing a simple suit, trying not to draw unnecessary attention. The secretary, a grey-haired woman, received him with polite but cool formality. Principal Price will see you in a few minutes. Please have a seat." Robert sat on a plastic chair in the hallway and watched the school's activity. Teachers passed by carrying stacks of papers. Children ran down the halls despite pleas to walk, and there was a constant buzz of life and learning that made him smile involuntarily. That's when he saw her. Anna came down the stairs holding a young teacher's hand, carrying a backpack that seemed too big for her small frame. She walked with her head down, and Robert noticed that other students deliberately avoided her, some even making low comments that he couldn't hear, but that clearly hurt her. When Anna saw him, her face lit up completely. "Robert!" she shouted. Letting go of the teacher's hand and running toward him, Robert hugged her, feeling how she clung to him tightly, as if he were a safe harbor in a stormy sea. "Hi, Anna. How was school today?" "Better now that you're here," she replied, and the honesty of the answer broke his heart. The teacher approached, clearly confused by the scene. "Anna, do you know this gentleman?" Before Robert could answer, the principal's firm voice echoed down the hall. "Mr. Miller, I'm Margaret Price. Shall we talk?" Robert said goodbye to Anna with a promise to talk soon and followed the principal to her office. Margaret was a woman in her 50s, with short hair and an expression that mixed authority with exhaustion. Her office was small but organized, with diplomas on the wall and a class photo on her desk. "Mr. Miller," she began as soon as they sat down, "I need to be direct. In 15 years as an educator, I've learned to be cautious when strange adults show a special interest in our children, especially those in socially vulnerable situations." Robert had prepared for this conversation, but the principal's frankness still caught him by surprise. "I completely understand your concern, Miss Price. I brought some documents that might help clarify who I am." He opened his briefcase and placed a series of documents on the desk. Clean criminal background checks, references from charities he supported, letters of recommendation from business partners, and even a recent psychological evaluation he had requested specifically for this meeting. Margaret examined each document carefully, and Robert could see her expression gradually shifting from suspicion to curiosity. "Impressive," she admitted finally. "But it still doesn't explain why a successful businessman wants to throw an expensive party for a girl he barely knows." Robert took a deep breath. He had decided to be completely honest. "Because she reminded me of myself as a child, because I saw in her a sadness I know all too well, and because I believe every child deserves to feel special at least once. You had a difficult childhood. I had a lonely childhood," Robert corrected. "Materially, I never lacked for anything. Emotionally, well, let's just say my parents were more interested in building fortunes than in building relationships." Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying him intently. "And now you want to make up for that by helping Anna." "Maybe," Robert admitted. "Or maybe she's helping me more than I'm helping her. I'm not sure, Ms. Price. I just know that when I saw her crying alone in that park, something inside me woke up." The silence that followed was long. Margaret drummed her fingers on the desk, clearly weighing her options. "Mr. Miller," she said finally, "I'm going to be honest with you. Anna is a special child, smart and resilient, but she faces discrimination here because of her family's socio-economic status. Some parents..." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "Some parents don't want their children mixing with kids of her kind." Robert felt the anger rise again, but controlled himself. "And what does the school do about that?" "What we can, within our limits. But I can't force families to change their prejudices." Robert leaned forward. "Ms. Price, I want to throw this party not just for Anna, but to show these kids and their parents that she deserves respect and friendship as much as any other child. Can I have your cooperation?" Margaret was silent for long seconds, studying Robert with an intensity that made him feel like he was undergoing a test he wasn't sure he could pass. Finally, she sighed and opened a desk drawer. "Mr. Miller," she said, pulling out a folder, "I'm going to show you something that might change your perspective on what you're trying to do." She opened the folder and placed a series of photographs on the desk. Robert leaned in for a better look and felt his stomach turn. They were photos of Anna at different times in school, alone at recess while other kids played in groups, sitting by herself in the cafeteria, being ignored during group activities. "These photos were taken by our school psychologist over the last 6 months, Margaret explained. "Anna came here a year ago, after she and her mother moved to the neighborhood. At first, she tried to fit in like any child would, but..." She moved to the next photo where Anna was clearly crying in the school bathroom. The parents started to complain. They said they didn't want their kids mixing with children from broken homes. Some went as far as to expressly forbid their children from playing with her. Robert felt a wave of nausea. How could they do that to a child? "It's more common than you think," Margaret replied sadly. "And now, Mr. Miller, imagine what will happen when these same parents find out that a millionaire businessman is throwing an exclusive party for Anna. What will they think? What will they say?" Robert began to understand where she was going. They'll say I have questionable motives. Exactly, and not just that. Margaret stood up and walked to the window. They'll use it as one more reason to isolate Anna even further. They'll say she's different, that she attracts some strange types, that it's dangerous to let their kids near her. The silence in the room was deafening. Robert looked again at the photos of Anna alone and felt his carefully laid plan crumble before his eyes. For the first time, he began to question whether his attempt to help could, in fact, harm the girl even more. "So what do you suggest I do?" he asked. Genuinely lost, Margaret returned to her chair and faced him directly. "Honestly, give up. Leave Anna alone and get on with your life. I know it sounds cruel, but sometimes the best way to help is not to interfere." Robert leaned back in his chair, processing the principal's words. Part of him knew she was right, that his interference could bring more problems than solutions. But another part, a part that had awakened that afternoon in the park, refused to accept that a child should continue to suffer simply because the world was unjust. "And if I found a different way to help?" he asked. "A way that didn't draw so much attention?" Margaret shook her head. "Mr. Miller, the problem isn't how you help. The problem is that any help coming from someone of your social standing will be viewed with suspicion and used against Anna." It was then that Robert had an idea so simple and yet so radical that it made him stand up abruptly from his chair. "What if I changed my social standing?" Margaret looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Robert began to pace the small office, his mind working quickly. "What if, instead of a rich businessman doing charity, I just became a friend, someone who genuinely cares without showing off, without grand gestures?" "Mr. Miller." "No," he interrupted, the idea gaining momentum. "Listen, what if I cancelled the party at Six Flags and instead organized something simple, right here at the school, something that included all the children, not just Anna?" Margaret frowned. "Go on. A spring festival, maybe, or a holiday celebration. Something I could sponsor anonymously, with no apparent connection to me, and in the meantime I could just be present in her life in a more natural way." The principal studied him for a long moment. "You're talking about giving up your attempt to impress and just being present." "Exactly," Robert said, feeling for the first time that he was on the right path. "Maybe Anna doesn't need a huge party. Maybe she just needs someone who truly cares." Margaret leaned back in her chair, a small smile appearing on her face. "You know something, Mr. Miller. Maybe you understand more about children than I thought." In the days following his meeting with Margaret, Robert cancelled the Six Flags reservation and plunged into a deep reflection on how he could truly make a difference in Anna's life without causing more problems. For the first time in his business career, he was planning something where success wouldn't be measured in numbers or profits, but in genuine smiles and moments of happiness. On Friday, he showed up at the school at dismissal time, wearing jeans and a simple shirt. He had traded his Mercedes for a modest car borrowed from an employee and waited outside the gates like any parent or guardian would. When Anna saw him, she ran toward him with her characteristic joy. But Robert noticed that other children were watching the scene with curiosity. Some parents were looking too, and he could feel the weight of their silent judgments. "Robert, you came to get me?" Anna asked, grabbing his hand. "I came to see if you'd like to get some ice cream with me," he said. "But first, I need to talk to your mom." They walked together to the wooden house, and Robert noticed how Anna chattered excitedly about her day, telling him about her lessons and the drawings she had made. She didn't mention other classmates or games at recess, and Robert realized she had learned to find joy in the small things that didn't depend on the acceptance of others. Carla was sweeping the small yard when they arrived. She looked up and Robert saw the same mix of gratitude and concern he had noticed at their first meeting. "Good afternoon, Carla," he greeted her. "I'd like to talk with you. If you have a moment." She leaned the broom against the wall and invited him inside. Anna ran into the yard to play, leaving the two adults alone in the small living room. "Carla," Robert began, "I want you to know that my intentions with Anna are completely sincere. I understand it must be hard to trust someone who just appeared out of nowhere in your lives." Carla sat in the single chair and gestured for him to settle on the floor, as he had on his first visit. "Mr. Miller, I'm not going to lie. I'm worried. Anna has gotten very attached to you, and I don't know how I'll explain it to her if one day you decide you don't want to be part of our lives anymore." Carla's honesty hit him deeply. He could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear of a mother who had already seen her daughter suffer too many rejections. "Carla," he said with all the sincerity he could muster, "I'm not going to abandon Anna. I know it's hard to believe, but she's changed something in me. For the first time in years, I feel like I have a real purpose." Carla studied him for a long moment. "What do you want, exactly? I mean, long term?" Robert had thought about this question all week. "I want to be a positive presence in her life, not a savior, not someone who solves all her problems, but simply an adult friend she can trust. And in return," the question was direct. No beating around the bush. Robert smiled involuntarily. Carla was sharper than many executives he negotiated with. "In return for nothing," he replied. "Carla, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I have professional success, recognition, everything our society considers important. But until I met Anna, I had no genuine joy. She gave that back to me." Carla remained silent, processing his words. "I know it must sound strange," Robert continued, "but your daughter taught me that there are things more valuable than any amount of money. The way she smiles when she makes a drawing to show me, how she shares her snack with me without a second thought, how she finds magic in simple things. That's a gift she gives me, not the other way around." Carla discreetly wiped away a tear that had formed in the corner of her eye. "Do you really believe that?" "I do," Robert said without hesitation. And that's why I want to do things the right way, without drawing attention, without creating problems for you. I just want to be present, if you'll let me." At that moment, Anna appeared at the door with a drawing in her hand. "Look what I made. It's the three of us eating cake." Robert looked at the drawing, 3 smiling figures around a table, done in vibrant crayon colors, and felt his heart warm. "It's beautiful, Anna," Carla said, hugging her daughter. "How about we show Robert our garden out back?" As Anna pulled him by the hand to see the tomatoes she and her mother were growing in old cans, Robert realized he was participating in exactly the kind of moment he had missed in his own childhood, simple, genuine, and full of love. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert established a routine he never imagined he could enjoy. On Fridays, he would pick Anna up from school and they would get ice cream together. On Saturdays, he would visit the family for a simple lunch that Carla lovingly prepared. On Sundays, he would sometimes take Anna for a walk in the park where they had met, always returning before dusk. For Robert, these moments became the most precious of the week. Anna had developed a habit of preparing little gifts for him, colorful drawings, flowers picked from the yard, or made-up stories she would tell with adorable seriousness. In return, he taught her about the plants in their small garden, helped with her homework, and listened patiently to her imaginary adventures. Carla, initially cautious, began to relax in his presence. Robert discovered she was an intelligent and determined woman who dreamed of one day finishing her education and having a profession that would give her more stability. Their conversations became more natural, and he began to deeply admire her strength and dedication. But not everything was smooth sailing. On the 3rd Friday, when Robert arrived to pick up Anna, he noticed a group of mothers whispering near the school gate. When they saw him, the conversation stopped abruptly, but the suspicious glances were unmistakable. One of the women, elegantly dressed, made a point of pulling her son away as Anna approached. "Robert," Anna said, seemingly oblivious to the tension, "Ms. Mendes wants to talk to you." Paula Mendez was Anna's classroom teacher, a young educator Robert had met briefly the week before. She approached with a worried expression. "Mr. Miller," she said quietly, "I need to warn you about something. Some of the parents are asking questions about you." Robert felt a pit in his stomach. What kind of questions? They want to know who you are, why you're always here, what your relationship with Anna is. Felipe's mother even suggested the school should run a background check on you. Anna, who had been distracted by a butterfly, didn't hear the conversation, but Robert saw how other children avoided her, creating an invisible circle of isolation around her. "And what did you tell them?" he asked. "The truth, that you're a friend of the family who offered to help with Anna." But Paula hesitated. They're not satisfied with that answer. That night, Robert talked to Carla about the situation. She listened in silence, but he could see the worry growing in her eyes. "I knew this would happen," she said finally. "People like us don't usually have friends like you. To them, there must be some hidden motive." "And do you believe there is?" Robert asked. Carla looked him straight in the eye. "No, I've spent weeks watching you with Anna. I've seen how you react when she talks, how you worry about her feelings, how genuinely happy you are with the little things she shares. Nobody can fake that for this long." Robert felt a profound sense of relief, but the worry lingered. What if the situation gets worse? What if this ends up hurting Anna even more? "Then we'll face it together," Carla said, with a determination that surprised him. "Anna has never been happier than she has been these last few weeks. She talks about you all the time, shows your drawings to the neighbors, tells everyone she has a special friend. I'm not going to let them take that away from her." Robert was touched by Carla's loyalty, but also terrified by the responsibility. For the first time in his life, his actions affected not just himself, but people he had come to love. The following Monday, the situation escalated. Margaret called him into her office with an expression even more serious than the first time. "Robert," she said, using his first name for the first time, "we need to talk. I received a call from the district office. A few parents filed a formal complaint about your presence at the school." Robert sat down heavily in the chair. "What kind of complaint?" "They're alleging that you're disrupting the school environment and creating inappropriate situations. They're demanding an investigation into your intentions with Anna." The silence that followed was oppressive. Robert looked out the principal's window and saw children playing in the yard. Among them, Anna was alone again, sitting under a tree, drawing in a notebook. "What does this mean for Anna?" he asked. "It means you might need to stay away for a while, until things cool down." Robert felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The thought of abandoning Anna just as she was starting to trust him was unbearable. Robert spent the weekend in an agony he hadn't known since childhood. The idea of disappearing from Anna's life without explanation tormented him, but the possibility of causing more trouble for her and Carla was equally unbearable. On Monday, he decided he needed to speak personally with the parents who were spreading the rumors. He arrived at the school early and waited in the parking lot. It didn't take long to identify the group, 3 elegantly dressed women chatting animatedly next to luxury cars. Robert took a deep breath and approached. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I'm Robert Miller. I believe you have some concerns about my friendship with Anna Evans." The 3 women turned, and Robert saw surprise and embarrassment on their faces. One of them, a blonde with short hair, recovered first. "Mr. Miller," she said with a forced smile. "I'm Trish Wallace, Felipe's mother. It's nice to meet you in person." "Likewise," Robert replied. "I'd like to clear up any misunderstanding about my intentions with Anna." Trish exchanged glances with the other women. "Mr. Miller, please understand our position. It's unusual to see a businessman take such an interest in a child from, well, a family in such a different situation from your own." Robert remained calm, despite his growing irritation. And what would be the problem with a successful person helping a child in need? "There's no problem at all," another woman, a brunette with stylish glasses, chimed in. I'm Heather Brooks, but understand we have young children here. We have to be cautious. Cautious about what exactly? Robert asked, his patience wearing thin. The women looked at each other again, clearly uncomfortable with the direct confrontation. It was Trish who finally answered, her voice taking on a harder edge. Mr. Miller, we've looked into you. We know you're divorced, no children, extremely wealthy. It doesn't seem natural for someone in your position to develop this kind of affection for a needy little girl. Robert felt his blood boil. What are you implying, exactly? We're not implying anything, Heather said quickly. So, we're just questioning the motives behind so much interest. And what if I told you that Anna reminds me of myself as a child, that I see in her the loneliness I felt and want to help her overcome it? Trish laughed humorlessly. Please, Mr. Miller, men like you don't do charity for sentimental reasons. There's always something else going on. Robert realized he was fighting a losing battle. No matter what he said, these women had already made up their minds. Worse, he was beginning to suspect there was something more behind their hostility. May I ask how you obtained information about my personal life? He questioned. The three looked at each other again, and Robert caught a flash of guilt in their eyes. The information is publicly available, Trish said evasively. Not all of it, Robert pressed. My marital status, for example, that requires a more targeted search. It was then that Heather made the mistake of glancing at the phone in her hand. Robert followed her gaze and saw a messaging app screen with a group chat titled R. Miller Investigation. You created a group chat to investigate me, he asked, incredulous. We created a group to protect our children, Trish answered defensively. Robert felt a mix of anger and sadness. When you think you're protecting your children by teaching them that it's suspicious to show kindness, by showing them they should distrust any gesture of generosity. We're teaching them to be realistic, Heather said. The world isn't a fairy tale, Mr. Miller. You're right, Robert agreed, his voice growing colder. The world isn't a fairy tale. It's a place where a 7-year-old girl cries alone in a park because no one showed up for her birthday. It's a place where adults create group chats to attack someone who's trying to make a child smile. The women fell silent, but Robert wasn't finished. You want to know the truth about my motives? Anna taught me that I had forgotten how to feel genuine joy. She showed me that there are things more important than money and success. And now you want to take that away from her because you can't believe that kindness can exist without strings attached. Robert turned to leave, but stopped and looked back at them one last time. You should know you're not protecting your children. You're teaching them prejudice, suspicion, and cruelty. And one day, when your children need the kindness of a stranger, I hope they find someone better than you. 3 days after the confrontation in the school parking lot, Robert discovered the situation had deteriorated far beyond what he had imagined. Sandra arrived in his office on Thursday morning with a look of panic he had never seen before. Mr. Miller, she said, placing a tablet on his desk, you need to see this. On the screen was a post on a local social media network that made Robert feel as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. The post, shared hundreds of times, showed a photo of him leaving the school with Anna, accompanied by a caption that read, "Obsessive millionaire stalks underprivileged child. Parents allege suspicious behavior. Demand investigation." Robert read the comments with growing horror. Malicious speculation about his intentions multiplied, each more cruel than the last. Some people had even shared his personal information, including his company's address. How did they get this photo? He asked, his voice hoarse. Probably someone at the school, Sandra replied. Sir, there's more. Your ex-wife called this morning. Robert looked up, surprised. He and Valerie had divorced 5 years ago after a loveless marriage that lasted only 3 years. They rarely spoke, except through their lawyers. What did she want? She said she saw the post and that, well, she's concerned about your reputation. She mentioned something about the divorce settlement and how this scandal could affect the business. Robert understood immediately. Valerie received a substantial alimony payment based on the success of his companies. If his reputation was ruined, it would directly affect the payments she received. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Carla, and there was panic in her voice. "Robert, you need to come here now," she said, crying. Something terrible happened. Robert dropped everything at the office and rushed to the wooden house. He found Carla in the yard, hugging Anna, who was sobbing convulsively. The girl's face was red, and tear tracks stained her cheeks. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside them. "At school," Anna managed to say between sobs. "The kids, they said you're a bad man who's going to hurt me." Robert felt as if he'd been physically struck. He looked at Carla, who was just as devastated. "The mothers showed the post to their children," Carla explained bitterly. "They've turned Anna into a freak. The kids are scared of her now. They say she attracts dangerous men." "Miss Mendez tried to defend her," Anna continued, "but the kids wouldn't listen. At recess, nobody would play with me. They said if they played with me, you might show up and... Anna couldn't finish the sentence. Breaking down into sobs again, Robert hugged her, feeling his own tears burn his eyes. "Anna," he said softly, "look at me." The girl lifted her red-rimmed eyes and met his gaze. "You know I would never, ever hurt you, don't you?" Anna nodded vigorously. "I know, but they don't. And now they're scared of me." Robert looked at Carla over Anna's head and saw in her eyes the same thought that was running through his own mind. Maybe it would be better if he stayed away. "Carla," he said quietly, "maybe we should—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "We're not going to let them win. Anna, do you want Robert to go away?" Anna clung to Robert fiercely. "No, I don't." "Then he won't," Carla said, a fierce determination in her voice. "Robert, these people are trying to tear us apart because they can't accept that someone can just be good. But if you give up now, they win. And Anna learns that the people we love can abandon us when things get hard." Robert looked at the two of them, a young woman who had faced unimaginable adversity and kept fighting, and a little girl who had suffered rejection after rejection but could still love without reservation. They were willing to fight for him, just as he was willing to fight for them. "Then we fight," he said, embracing them both. "But I have to warn you, it might get a lot worse before it gets better." "I don't care," Carla said. "Anna deserves to have people in her life who care about her. And you deserve to be happy," Anna added, looking up at Robert with a wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so young. At that moment, Robert knew there was no turning back, regardless of the consequences. He would not abandon these two people who had become his chosen family. The weekend that followed was the hardest Robert had ever faced. The social media posts continued to spread, and he discovered the situation had breached the school's boundaries, even affecting his business. 2 major clients cancelled meetings, citing image concerns, and some of his own employees started looking at him differently. On Monday morning, Sandra informed him that Valerie had scheduled an urgent meeting with him for that afternoon. Robert knew it wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. Valerie arrived at the office dressed in a flawless power suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, and an expression of cold determination Robert knew all too well. She had been like that throughout their entire marriage, calculating, concerned only with appearances and social status. "Robert," she said, sitting in the chair opposite his desk without being invited, "we need to resolve this ridiculous situation before it ruins everything we've built." "We didn't build anything, Valerie," Robert replied. "We've been divorced for 5 years, and you still pay me a substantial alimony based on the success of your companies," she retorted. "If your reputation is destroyed because of this sick obsession with a child, my financial security will be affected too." Robert felt the anger rise. "Sick obsession? I'm helping a child who needs support." Valerie laughed humorlessly. "Robert, wake up and smell the coffee. You're a 52-year-old divorced childless man, spending all your free time with a 7-year-old girl from a dirt-poor family. How does that sound to you? It sounds like compassion, something you never understood. Compassion? Valerie leaned forward, her eyes glinting with malice. Or is it a pathetic attempt to fill the void you feel from never having had children of your own? The remark hit Robert like a slap in the face. It was true that he had always wanted children, but Valerie had always refused, claiming a pregnancy would derail her modeling career. "Leave Anna out of this," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Anna." Valerie repeated the name with disdain. "You call her by her first name, as if she were your daughter, Robert. Don't you see how sick that sounds?" Robert shot up from his chair, but Valerie continued, relentless. "You know what I think is happening. You're having a midlife crisis and using this poor child as a way to feel important, needed. You're playing daddy at the expense of a vulnerable family." "Enough," Robert said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "No, Robert. Now you're going to listen to me." Valerie stood up too, facing him directly. "I organized this social media campaign. I convinced those mothers to investigate you, and I will keep going until you stop this charade." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert looked at the woman who had been his wife and saw a stranger with a heart of ice. "You did what?" "I did what was necessary to protect our interests," Valerie said without a hint of remorse. "Robert, you may be my ex-husband, but you're still my income stream. I will not let you destroy that over a sentimental whim." Robert walked to the window, trying to process the betrayal. Valerie had orchestrated everything: the mother's suspicion, the malicious posts, Anna's suffering at school, all to protect her own financial comfort. "Robert," Valerie continued, "I have a proposal. You walk away from this family immediately and publicly. You issue a statement saying you realized your help was being misinterpreted and that you've decided to focus on institutional charities. In return, I'll stop the campaign and let your reputation recover." Robert turned to face her. "And if I refuse, then I will escalate the attacks. I have contacts in the media, Robert. I can turn this into a national scandal. You'll be known as the businessman who preys on underprivileged children. Your company will go under, and I will sue you for breach of our settlement agreement." Robert realized he was at a crossroads. He could give in to Valerie's threats and protect his career and reputation, but that would mean abandoning Anna and Carla just when they needed him most. Or he could fight, knowing the price would likely be losing everything he had built professionally. He thought of Anna crying in the yard, of Carla's words about not letting them win, of the promise he had made to never abandon that special little girl. "Valerie," he said finally, his voice calm but resolute, "my answer is no." Robert's refusal left Valerie visibly furious. She stormed out of his office, promising he would regret it, but Robert had already made a decision that would change everything. If Valerie wanted to use the media as a weapon, he could play that game too. The following afternoon, Robert did something he had never done in his entire career. He called a personal press conference, not to talk about business or product launches, but to defend his honor and protect Anna. The event hall in his corporate building was packed. Journalists from various outlets attended, some curious, others clearly expecting a scandal. Robert stepped up to the podium with a folder in his hand and a determination that surprised even his closest staff. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," he began, his voice firm and clear, "I have called this conference to address the malicious accusations that have been circulating about my relationship with a 7-year-old child named Anna Evans." A murmur went through the hall. Robert opened the folder and took out a series of documents. "First, I want to present psychological evaluations from 3 independent professionals, attesting to my mental stability and the absence of any behavioral disorders. Second, I have here updated clean background checks and a private investigation I commissioned on myself so that all of you have access to the same facts." He paused, observing the surprised faces in the audience. But I'm not here just to defend myself. I'm here to expose the truth about who is really behind this smear campaign. Robert played a recording on the sound system. It was the conversation he'd had with Valerie in his office the day before. His assistant Sandra had suggested he record all meetings after the problems started, and he had taken her advice. Valerie's voice echoed through the hall. I organized this social media campaign. I convinced those mothers to investigate you, and I will keep going until you stop this charade. The silence in the hall was absolute. Robert saw reporters scribbling furiously and photographers firing their cameras. This woman is my ex-wife, Robert explained. She orchestrated a defamation campaign against me because she fears that any damage to my reputation will affect the alimony she receives. She used the fear and prejudice of a few mothers to attack not just me, but an innocent child. Robert took a deep breath before continuing. Anna Evans is a 7-year-old girl I met crying alone in a park because no one had shown up for her birthday. She touched me deeply because she reminded me of my own lonely childhood. Yes, I decided to help her. Yes, I became a friend to her family. And no, there is absolutely nothing inappropriate about this relationship. He held up a photo Anna had drawn, enlarged for everyone to see. It was the drawing of the three of them eating cake together, with the words, "My chosen family," written in colorful, childish letters. This is Anna's view of our relationship. To her, I'm simply someone who cares, who shows up when I promise I will, who celebrates her small victories and comforts her when she's sad. To me, she's a reminder that pure goodness exists in the world. Robert put the photo down and looked directly at the cameras. Today, I want to announce that I am creating a foundation dedicated to helping children in vulnerable situations. Not because I want to clean up my image, but because Anna taught me that there are thousands of children like her who deserve love, opportunities, and dignity. He paused, emotion showing in his voice for the first time. I am also offering a full scholarship for Anna to one of the best private schools in the city and a job with a respectable salary for her mother, Carla Evans, at one of my companies, not as charity but in recognition of the value and strength of this extraordinary family. The hall erupted with questions, but Robert held up a hand. One last thing. To any parent watching, teach your children that kindness isn't suspicious, that compassion doesn't have ulterior motives, and that the world becomes a better place when we extend a hand to those in need. Anna taught me that. And now I'm passing the lesson on. Robert left the podium under a barrage of flashbulbs, knowing he had changed not only his own life, but possibly the future of Anna and Carla forever. 3 months after the press conference, Robert was in the backyard of a new house, simple, but comfortable and safe, watching Anna play with 2 friends from her new school. The 2-bedroom apartment was in a middle-class neighborhood, with a small green space where Anna had planted sunflowers that were already beginning to grow. Carla appeared at the kitchen door, wearing an impeccable business-casual outfit. She had adapted surprisingly well to her new job as an HR coordinator in the social impact division of Robert's company. Her natural leadership and empathy, honed by years of hard work, proved to be exactly what the foundation needed. Odi, the girls want you to tell the story of the dragon who became a gardener, Carla said, smiling. It was one of the favorite stories Robert had invented for Anna, about a scary dragon who discovered he preferred planting flowers to scaring people. Robert joined the children on the grass, and for the first time in months, there was no tension in the air. The press conference had completely changed the narrative. The exposure of Valerie's manipulations had generated a wave of public support for Robert and Anna. Several families from Anna's new school had reached out, offering genuine friendship. "Robert," Anna said, interrupting the story mid-sentence, "you're going to be at my 8th birthday party, right?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he promised, and Anna beamed. Anna's 2 friends, Beatrice and Sophia, looked at Robert with respectful curiosity. Their families had been among the first to reach out after understanding the true story, and Robert was touched to see how these children accepted Anna without any prejudice. "Uncle Robert," said Beatrice. Anna had taught her friends to call him that. "Is it true you're going to open a school for poor kids?" "Not a school," Robert corrected patiently, "but a foundation that will help kids like Anna get better opportunities. Education, counseling, sports and arts programs." "And can all kids join?" asked Sophia. "All who need it," Robert confirmed, "because every child deserves to have their dreams supported." Anna stood up and hugged Robert tightly. "Thank you," she whispered in his ear, "for not giving up on me." Robert felt tears prick his eyes. In the past few months, he had lost a few prejudiced clients, but gained the respect of partners who admired his courage. Valerie had lost the lawsuit she filed against him, and her alimony had been revised after the exposure of her manipulations. More importantly than all of that, Robert had found something money could never buy: a real family and a true purpose. Carla came over and sat beside them on the grass. "Robert," she said, "I want you to know, you didn't just save Anna, you saved me too. For the first time in years, I feel like we have a stable future." "You two saved me first," Robert replied. "Anna taught me that love isn't about blood or legal papers. It's about choosing to be present, especially when it gets hard." At that moment, the sun began to set, painting the sky in golden hues. Anna had gone back to playing with her friends, her laughter echoing through the yard. Robert watched the scene and realized this was the happiness he had been searching for his whole life without knowing it. His company was stronger than ever, now focused on projects with social impact. The Anna Evans Foundation, a name the girl herself had chosen, was already helping 50 families. And every Sunday, Robert, Carla, and Anna gathered for lunch, a tradition they planned to keep forever. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Robert helped put away the toys and got ready to leave. Anna ran up to him with a gift wrapped in colorful paper. "This is just because," she said, handing him the package. Inside was a handmade picture frame with the photo of the three of them at the first birthday they had celebrated together in the small wooden house. On the frame, Anna had written in her careful handwriting, "The best family in the world." Robert hugged Anna one more time, knowing he had learned the most important lesson of his life, that true wealth isn't measured in bank balances, but in sincere smiles, warm hugs, and the certainty that there's someone in the world who is happy just because you exist. As he drove home that night, Robert smiled, remembering the little girl crying alone in the park. That grey Sunday afternoon had changed 3 lives forever, proving that sometimes the most casual encounters can be the most transformative. And at the playground where it all began, now renovated by the foundation, children from all walks of life played together, learning from a young age that kindness knows no borders and that every child deserves love and opportunity.